I'm Paul Bloom. I'm a professor of psychology at University of Toronto and an emeritus professor at Yale University. And I study human nature. I study children, I study development. I'm particularly interested in morality, in the social emotions, in how we understand ourselves and how we relate to other people.
The psychology of revenge.
I study morality, moral psychology, our beliefs about what's right and wrong, and our impulse, sometimes to do the right thing, sometimes to do the wrong thing, and where that comes from and how that all works. And I study this because I think it's probably the most central part of being human. If we didn't have a sense of right and wrong, we couldn't coordinate our actions. We couldn't work together in groups. We couldn't have families, have social relations, have friends. We have social networks that are based on promises. And to have a promise as the assumption that breaking a promise is wrong. It's based on agreements. And to have an agreement means the moral view that someone who reneges on an agreement is a bad person. Someone who does what they're supposed to do is a good person. If a virus came down and suddenly stripped away from humans all of our moral sense, all of our sense of right and wrong, we would immediately descend into barbarity. And so morality is central to making us human. I'm currently involved in a series of research studies right now looking at the nature of revenge. And we actually had this study. This is with my colleagues, Anna Gatman and Jordan Wiley. We're currently looking at this Reddit forum where people tell stories of revenge, and there's hundreds of thousands of stories. And we're using an AI to go through them, looking at the stories of revenge and trying to ask, what do they have in common? How do they differ? How do they work? Are men more vengeful than women? How does the intensity of the bad act connect to the type of reprisal? What kind of reprisals do people do? And so on. The whole scope of moral life just totally fascinates me. One of the great questions through our intellectual history is, where did morality come from? How did we get from creatures who evolved through natural selection, a fundamentally selfish process involving the replication of genes? How did we get from that to creatures who help each other, love each other, get outraged at unfairness, help distant strangers, and so on? This is one of the great questions, and I think it's been mostly solved. And I think the answer is different parts. One part of the answer is that we share our genes with other creatures. And so natural selection, properly understood, entails that animals will be favored if they felt compassion and kindness to those who are their genetic relatives. And in this way, parents love their children, children love their parents. That the family network is built on sort of sustained compassion and affection and altruism. A second part of the story is reciprocal altruism. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You help me on Monday, I help you on Tuesday. And in this way, we can get more by working together than what either one of us could have done individually. We both benefit from a system where if you are sick, I take care of your child, and when I am sick, you take care of my child. Now, this system can't be sustained unless we have some punitive desires as well. Because if I help you on Tuesday and then Wednesday rolls around and you say, I'm busy, I'm not going to do anything for you, you die. Well, if you would benefit from that betrayal, then morality could never evolve, kindness could never evolve. But you don't benefit because along with a desire to establish connections and a desire to be kind to others, we've evolved a punitive impulse to punish those that violate cooperative agreements. These two parts of the story, the family part, what's called kin selection, and the part that involves community, reciprocal altruism, work together to establish a fundamental moral core involving those we are close to. I said that in large extent we solved the problem of morality, but there are mysteries. So here's a couple of them. Why do we care about people in faraway lands? Why do we care about fairness? Sometimes fighting against a system that's unfair, even if we benefit from the unfairness ourselves, even if we and our families benefit, Why are there men who fight for the rights of women? Why were there whites who fought for the rights of slaves? How do we transcend our biological limitations and care about people who are neither our genetic relatives nor people we are in constant contact with? I think we have answers to those questions. I think that once we have the biological foundations, other forces such as religion and cultural practices and often cold analytic reasoning cause us to expand this moral circle. So morality sounds like a pretty good thing. And it is a good thing. It's essential for everything we value. But nothing's entirely good. And I've become interested in the last few years with what you could call bad morality. And the idea is that often our moral sense, our sense of right and wrong, lead us to inflict cruelties on other people. Our moral sense of retribution, which I think is essential for being a good person, having a good society, often goes out of control and leads to terrible cases of vengeance. Our sexual morality, which serves a sort of narrow biological purpose, leads to discrimination of all sorts against sexual minorities. Our sense of obligation and retribution have perverse consequences in everyday life. So I think morality is 99% good, but it also fuels some of our worst excesses. And in some cases, I think we do better if we dial down our moral sense. So a critic could say, if morality is mostly good, almost entirely good, if it plays this role in human society, I say it is, why would I be interested in where it goes awry? And the answer is that where it goes awry has real consequences for people. And I think it's part of the puzzle of bad behavior that's sometimes missed. So when you think about bad behavior, about people preying on one another, all the various cruelties that we find in everyday life, you might be tempted to think, well, it's a lack of control. You know, you lose your temper. You have this sexual desire to attack somebody. You have this material desire to steal something. Or you might think it's selfishness, valuing yourself so much more than others. Or you might think it's dehumanization. You fail to see others as the people they are. And I actually think all of those theories are right. I think a lot of bad behavior is caused by lack of control. A lot of it is caused by selfishness. A lot of it is caused by dehumanization. But I think we don't understand evil. We don't understand bad behavior. And this, to me, is the missing piece of the puzzle. That once you appreciate that, things that were otherwise mysterious could come clear. And we could better understand the bad behavior of other people and sometimes of ourselves. What's some examples of what I'm talking about? Well, one example is vengeance. We have a punitive impulse, and again, I think good behavior could never arise unless it's accompanied by some desire to punish those who deceive, who free ride, who prey on others. It's a prerequisite. We need this vengeful appetite. But it can be indiscriminate. It can go too far. It can be short-sighted. There are these various studies, for instance, where you ask people, you have to figure out how much to punish this person. And it turns out that the extent of punishment you give them won't have any effect on their future behavior. People often say if the crime is bad enough, punish the maximum, regardless, even if it doesn't make a difference. There's some studies done where you tell people about a company, and this company did some sort of bad practice, and you say, how much do you want to fine the company? You could fine them a medium amount, which would cause them some harm, or you could fine them so much you'll put them out of business. But you tell people, if you put them out of business, they provide a valuable product no one else provides. It will actually cause mass harm everywhere, and it will make the world worse. People say, put them out of business. Make them suffer. And it's hard to step back and think in more of a sort of cost-benefit way, what will make the world better, when we're stuck with a retributive impulse. And then, of course, there's various cycles of violence where different countries, different groups go back and forth, each of them retaliating in righteous fury against what they perceive as the wrongs of others. I don't want to get political, but nobody could look at the Middle East and not see this. You look at the various things back and forth, say, between Hamas, between Israel, between Gaza, and there's at no point where one of the sides saying, I'm going to do some evil. I'm an evil person. I'm going to kill innocent people. That's not how it works. Each of the sides, when they do their acts that other people view probably rightly as monstrous, say to themselves, I'm doing the right thing. I am responding against this violence that has been done against my people. I am doing something righteous in the eyes of God. It is humbling, but important to recognize that very few villains think of themselves as villains. And retributive actions always feel great when you're doing them. Not just in a visceral way, but great, morally righteous. But it make the world worse. And I think in some sense, if we could turn down the dial of morality, we would do better. If after you do this terrible thing to me, I say to myself, well, what's the best thing to do? What will best cause peace and everything? Rather than thinking the right thing to do is to make you pay, the world will be better off as a whole. The psychologist Kurt Gray and his colleagues come up with a nice term called moral typecasting. And this refers to another problem with our moral thinking, which is that we tend to put people into one of two categories. They're villains or they're victims. And we fail to see that in the real world, most people are either neither or both. That often in that you can be both. People say in the Middle East conflict, each side views themselves as a victim of terrible actions by the others, retaliating righteously. Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives in the United States and elsewhere see themselves, always as victimized by the cruel policies of others, wishing that their tormentors would suffer or at best go away. The real world doesn't work like that. But if you say, I refuse to listen because they got to be villains, I will refuse to accept anything else, I think you're succumbing to a bias in moral thinking. It also leads, once you've realized that you're either a victim or a villain, it also leads to what's called competitive victimhood, where different individuals and different groups are scrambling to get themselves anointed to victim level, in which case they could do whatever they want and they're excused for their bad acts. This happens in the global sense. It also happens even in cultural wars that we have. So who's the victim? The female athletes who don't want trans women to compete with them, or trans women who are excluded from competing with female athletes. Who's the victim? Somebody who has views and they're forbidden from speaking, or students who are forced to hear views they don't want. You get this back and forth. Who's the victim? There is a fight for victim status. And you have to first to point out, this is kind of a dumb way to do things. A better way to do things would be to acknowledge these are difficult issues and you have to take into account multiple views. And there's psychological research on the effects of perceiving oneself as a victim. And it doesn't make you any nicer. It actually has the opposite effect. There are studies that find that people are reminded of their victimhood, they become more callous towards others, particularly those who they believe have caused them to suffer. There are studies that find that being seen as a victim makes you less generous towards others. After all, if I'm suffering, why should I help others? Someone else should help. I'm the victim here. If you're either a victim or a villain, moral judgment becomes a zero-sum game. There's no space in all or nothing framework to look at people in terms of competing interests, cost-benefit analyses. You're not going to understand what's going on. And you're not going to be able to productively enact compromises between groups with different priorities. A more psychologically accurate way of thinking about things and a more mature way is that it's not that everything is a compromise and there's no sense in which one side, it's not like nobody's ever right. But what you have to know is that everybody thinks they're right. Nobody thinks they're the baddies. And because of this, this is something that has to be transcended in order to foster dialogue, to bring peace, to make the world a bit better and more reasonable. At first, when I say, look, morality is actually a source of a lot of evil and bad stuff in the world, people are a little bit surprised. But it's not hard to make a persuasive case. Just about everybody who's involved in a war in the past thought they were the good guys. And it's only later, and sort of through the distance of history, we can get a sense of who's right and who's wrong. It's more difficult, I admit, to extend this view right now. Take something from the news as I'm talking about this. Luigi Mangione, who murdered a healthcare CEO, is now going on trial. And he has a lot of people who adore him. Now, he's a good-looking guy. I mean, it gets there's sort of an appeal. Maybe it's seen as transgressive behavior. But I think a lot of these people thought that what he did was right, that these large healthcare institutions do terrible damage to people and are cruel institutions. And the murder of the CEO was a good act. I find that a repellent view myself. But I would be naive if I didn't recognize that others disagree with me and that their disagreement is motivated by a moral sense that's just as intense as my moral sense. I am not advocating for a world without retribution. I actually think retribution is essential to have a world that's good. If you and I are cooperating and we're working together, and there's a community of people working together, we all benefit from this. But you know who really benefits? Somebody who just takes what we have and doesn't give anything in return. And if that's unchecked, everyone will be like that. There'll be no benefit to kindness, no benefit for cooperation. So along with a cooperative and loving instinct, we've evolved retributive instincts, retributive desires, and this is how good behavior continues. So I'm not against that. I'm not against the desire to strike back at bad people. Because by striking back at bad people, A, the bad people will stop being bad to some extent. You disincentivize it. And B, it discourages bad actions on the part of others. I am against an appetite for revenge that runs out of control. One of the problems with our punitive desires, and this is an issue with emotions more generally, is they could become unmoored from the purposes that they serve. So the purposes of deterrence is a legitimate purpose. But often we want revenge now in cases where it doesn't do any good. Often we want excessive revenge. We want terrible revenge. We want people to suffer where their suffering does no benefit, but just satisfies a certain itch within ourselves. So I would keep our retributive desires. If I was, an all-powerful God and could fiddle with people's brains, I would keep our retributive desires, but I'd hold them more in check. And of course, this is what a legal system does. If somebody breaks into my car and steals stuff, I'm not allowed to go up to them and murder them and kill their family. Because the law says, look, that's a crime, we're going to punish it, but we have what we view as an appropriate response. It takes it away from individuals. And I think there's a rationality to this. I think there's a rationality to offloading our individual appetite for revenge, giving it to the state. Ideally, and we're very far from ideal, but ideally then administering it in a fair way.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community where you get access to videos early, ad-free.